Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri. As ever, I have my very awesome co-host, Amy Cornell. Amy, nice to do a show with you again.
I know, this is very exciting. Can you believe we're on the slide into the holidays and everything?
I can't believe it. I know it's so, when this show airs, will be on the 17th of December with 2 weeks left in the year. Oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ready to put 2020 behind me.
I know it. And it's like, but it's amazing how quickly it seems like some things went super fast, other things went super slow. I mean, I remember when we started the podcast, this was such a huge undertaking and such a big, risk. And we're like, all right, we're going to do it. And now it's become such a part of our routine, and now it's like, wow. And now we're doing our December shows. It's nuts.
I know, it's crazy. And, like March felt like 6 years. And then, September and October both flew by at 95 miles an hour. I mean, it was just, it was pretty amazing. So and what we thought we would do, well, first off, before we go into what we're going to talk about on the show, I just wanted to say I'm so excited. How to Sell Books by the Truckload. The 2021 edition is live on Amazon for purchase. And just the ebook right now, if you are wanting to get the print book, it's coming out on January 1. We ran a huge and very successful BOGO, buy one, get one for the book, thanks to Amy. And we've talked about doing BOGOs on the show before. So if you follow us offline, you probably saw the BOGO and maybe were lucky enough to grab it. We are going to be doing another one for the print book. We always separate the editions so that we can get, maximize the momentum from the releases. But I'm really, really, really excited. And I have another book from book to bestseller. The last time that I wrote that book was 10 years ago. So we completely revamped it. It is nothing like any book that I've ever written. And that's going to be out sometime in January, I think late January, February. So
exciting.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. So today what we thought we would, this year obviously has brought many challenges for everybody in varying levels, but it has also changed industries. And one of the things that we thought the show was important to talk about the changes that we have seen, but then also changes that we kind of anticipate going forward in terms of what the publishing industry is going to look like and what the book marketing industry is going to look like, because both of these have seen very much a sea change in terms of promotion. We've been really lucky, and this is not to boast about us, but I'm just going to boast about us because we're awesome. We've been really lucky in that we were never, and the authors that work with us were never dependent on the things that got shut down. So we never had an author sitting on a 5-state or 5-city or whatever book tour that said, oh my gosh, everything is canceled. What am I going to do now? Everything that we do is, online. So there was nothing that impacted our marketing necessarily. But so many authors I know were sidelined wondering, should I still release my book? Or, should I go forward with the release that I planned, even though I'm not doing anything, I'm not doing any in-person events, that kind of thing. So, Amy, I think you and I talked about this before the show, that we thought it was important just to kind of walk through where we thought 2021 was going to take the book publishing and marketing industry.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode, Penny, actually. And to what you said about how fortunate we were, I love also, humble brag here, but I just love that what we already had in place and the kind of strategies that we continue to work on and test and perfect and things like that. I love that they are so solid that there's not a lot that can really derail it aside from your own commitment to putting in the work,
Yeah, absolutely.
That part was a really silver lining, I will say, for us, being able to say, yes, what we have going on still works. You still just have to bring your A game. That's all we need.
Well, and I think that one of the first things that I want to lead with, and just so y'all know, listening, we have we don't really script out the shows, but we put in talking points of things that we want to cover, just so we know that we're covering everything and we stay on track. Because if you've listened to enough of our shows, you know that we are very easily distracted. But one of the things, so this isn't necessarily on the list, Amy, but I think it's worth mentioning. I really think that, so I read a blog by Mike Shatskin, who is very, very smart, the other day, and he mentioned that he felt like general trade publishing was going to be going by the wayside. So general trade type books with, women's fiction and things that are very bookstore-ish kind of books. He felt like because publishers have had, bookstores have been closed and some places opened and mostly closed, and it's been very confusing and difficult to get access to bookstores, that piece of it is going to change what publishers publish going forward, because the general trade titles tended to be a fairly big market for publishers. Like that's kind of how they made their bread and butter a little bit. But on the flip side, I think that we are going to be seeing, and I'm taking these just a tiny little bit out of order, but we're going to be seeing a big explosion of independent titles, indie books. I think that, publishers aren't going to not keep publishing books, but we've seen, I think there was an article, Amy, that I sent you, that even the UK market has seen just tremendous growth in independently published books. And you know that if overseas markets are seeing a surge, we are probably seeing double that surge.
Right. Yes, I do remember that.
One of the things that we've started seeing a lot, and this is both just of note, but also some guidance too. We're seeing a lot of COVID books, and I'm not saying that and, rolling my eyes, but you got to be kind of careful. So I think the industry is going to see a lot of pandemic inspired everything. I think you're going to see, TV series. I think you're going to see that mentioned in movies, and you're definitely going to see it mentioned in books. But keep in mind that obviously in March, I remember telling Amy, this will be all over in 2 weeks. And here we are in December still dealing with this. But, technically by the middle of next year, we should be well past this, hopefully. So I think that there's nothing wrong with doing something that's specifically COVID inspired, but know that it just has an expiration date. So you want to be kind of careful with that. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that going forward, if you are writing a fiction book or something that has that kind of theme in it, I just feel like, Amy, I know that I'm sort of hesitating. I feel like it's got to be really unique, because everybody's, I think we're all a little PTSD about, this year. I would just be kind of careful with that. Like, I think that if you do a fiction book that has that theme in it, man, it's got to be really creative.
Right. I agree. And, for what it's worth, not everybody, see, this is even as it's like getting ready to come out of my mouth, because Penny and I chatted about a few things before we started recording. But, there are no participation trophies in publishing.
Right.
So I feel like the people that really were able to capitalize on this have done that.
Yeah.
To a really impressive degree. And that doesn't mean that if you're sitting here and you're listening to this and you're 75% done and you've got, a COVID or pandemic element, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, that you just have to throw everything in the trash and, pop open a bottle and start drinking. But, but you really need to know that, you are not the only one. All right. There's been a lot that has flooded the market already.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other books that, like you said, Penny, that are most definitely in the works still. And so you just have to be very realistic about what you're bringing to the table, what you're offering people. Also, be very realistic about what the market is looking for, or try to predict what might be appropriate when you're actually ready to publish, because that's going to change. This is something that is constantly changing, and you really have to keep that top of mind when you're getting ready to release that book and figuring out how to promote it and how to make it stand out. It can't be based on what you were inspired by when you started writing it, because the world will be a very different place at that point. It's just, It's going to be one of those topics. You have chosen something challenging, and you have to be ready to rise to the occasion.
Well, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think that the general consensus is, and you hear this on the news, you hear this just in conversation, that people say, when 2020 is behind me, I don't ever want to revisit that again. Like, a lot of people feel very strongly about how this year impacted them, even if they weren't impacted, even if everybody was healthy. Like, everybody has experienced this tremendous change, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I think you have to be really careful. How interested are people going to be in this going forward? It's kind of like, after anything big that is a world event, right? And not at all to compare this with war stories, because obviously this is a very different thing, right? But I want to say, like, even the first accounts of any major world wars or war events, we didn't really see any of those until 5 or maybe 10 years after they transpired, right?
Right.
So I think I think not to discourage you from, as Amy said, if you're 75% the way through and you're listening to this, you have to be, and I haven't gone to any taken a look at any bloggers in terms of what they will and won't review. Like, I've not seen any bloggers say, oh my gosh, I don't want to see anything that's COVID related. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that it's just, you have to be really, really unique. Everybody is, even though your experience was very different, everybody has had a shared experience. Like, we all we may remember the details differently and obviously have had different experiences, but it's going to be a little bit of a hard sell. So just get really, really creative, and just be, expect that if you do it, you're going to have a lot of competition.
Right. I think this is a very good point. In general, for anybody that's writing something inspired by a major event or point in time, you just really have to know that going into that project, you have to be ready to morph a little bit and expect to take a slightly different path, and continually reassess where the world is at and where the market is at. Because honestly, you still want people to read and buy that book. So if you are putting your head in the sand and, again, like, focusing on the original inspiration versus where everybody's at now, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And I think this is across the board for a lot of different industries and topics, Penny. We see this a lot, where somebody gets too in their head and too focused on their original inspiration to realize that they're actually end up limiting themselves at the end of the day when they finally get ready to publish.
Right, exactly. I think that we are, so I talked to an author, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and she said she was publishing a book at the end of the year about how to talk to your children during a pandemic. And the book was beautifully done. It was really, really beautifully done. But I did mention to her that, children are, as Amy, as you've mentioned to me about your children, children are very resilient. The book could be helpful, but also, if you're publishing it at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, you're at the tail end of this. So maybe instead of that, if you're listening to this and you think, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing, think about, how do you talk to your children about any world event, right? I think we have a lot of stuff that happens in any given year anyway, where people are impacted. So I just think, because Amy, you also see, what kinds of, because you're at the receiving end of a lot of our queries, what kinds of things have you started to see an uptick
in regards to topics, just what people are
yeah,
wanting
just
to
in
read about?
regards to sort of COVID inspired topics?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot. I will say a lot of people, for what it's worth, and I think this is actually a smart approach. We've seen quite a number of people, Penny, that are from very specific industries, whether it be finance or law or things like that, that have used this as an opportunity to kind of share their knowledge and help people be prepared for the unexpected and for what you can't predict and what you don't have control over. And I think that's a really brilliant way to capitalize on something that has changed a lot of people's lives without tethering yourself to it so tightly, that you're stuck in this kind of pocket of, any day now it may no longer be relevant. So I think we've seen a lot of people that have actually been very smart about it and have used this whole, world event and all of our experience to really push themselves to finally get that book out, which I appreciate so much.
Yeah.
I think that's been really wonderful. And I will say, there is a lot of stuff around families and children and things like that. And, for what it's worth, I've always thought a lot of times that these how to talk to your kids about insert whatever it is honestly more of a book for parents, because and again, this is my own experience with my kids, but my kiddos have been so resilient about so many things that have kept me up at night. And that's one of the beauties of being young.
Yeah.
I think, so I think a lot of it also is these books. Yes, they're designed to be children's books, but they're also, I think more so they're to help walk parents through expressing their feelings and their fears and all these things that they're experiencing in a way with their children, so they don't feel like that communication is cut off. So,
right.
It's like, oh, I would love to see more books that just say, hey, this is actually for you, but it's for you to approach your kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say a lot of self-help, things like that. I think we've seen, I don't want to say surprisingly, like I'm shocked, but some really well done inspiration for helping people through times that where anxiety is high, where you have very little control over what's going on. We've had a lot of those books, and we've seen we do see upticks in, I would say, spiritual and religious inspired books as well. People feel, again, it's along the same path. They know there are people out there that are struggling, that are trying to get through things, trying to, keep their lives as normal as possible. And they recognize that that's an opportunity to step in and try to be a source of information and guidance and things like that. So I would say that those are our biggest ones, where people have really used this to go in and say, here's how I can help you get through this and beyond. And I think those have been some very smart ways to address what's going on without limiting yourself in any way.
Well, and I think that one of the things that I am so looking forward to seeing is the person who publishes a book that talks about, so these are actually two different books. One that talks about how this year has changed society, right? So how this has changed us, because it's left an imprint on everybody. And what is that going to look like going forward? I think that would be a fascinating book. The next is a business type book that talks about how this is changing business. And we're going to get into that in the marketing piece of it, because there certainly is some there's a lot that kind of bleeds into that as well. But how this year has changed business and potentially changed it for good, I think would be really, really interesting, as well as how you can capitalize on that as a business owner, right? And how it's going to change jobs, right? So some of the new types of jobs that have come out of this, I think, would be a really, really interesting topic. I think that if you are sitting on a book that talks about meditation or anxiety or yoga or something that helps us to kind of find our center, I think that's going to be really popular in the new year, because I think this has, 2020 gave people anxieties they didn't even know they had, right? So, you know what I mean? I mean, literally, like I was at Costco the other day and I saw 3 or 4 shopping carts full of toilet paper, and like I was having flashbacks to March. I'm like, oh my God, are we doing this again? Right?
Right. You're looking
like,
for
I just,
the 15
I was like,
children.
I was all triggered by the toilet paper in these shops. Like, oh dear God. So I think that it's really left an imprint in different ways, like on different people. But in terms of book marketing, there's an interesting article that I read the other day, and I'm actually going to do a blog post on this separately, just because I think it's worth unpacking more. But supply chain issues may be something going forward that we have, that we continue to have challenges with, right? So I think that supply chain issues are something that kind of haunted us this year. And we know that because Amazon prioritized a lot of stuff in a very weird way and deprioritized print books, which was very difficult for a lot of authors. So one of the things that I think that I would personally look out for in 2021 is these supply chain issues continuing. Not that we're going to still be stuck in the whole 2020 cycle in terms of lockdown, et cetera, but I don't think these supply chain issues are going to go away. I think that, and part of the reason is because so many of us have now become used to ordering online, and obviously the Amazon systems can't support that as well as we all thought, because some of these shipments have been a little bit wacky. All that to say that I've seen some authors that are really focused on doing local promotion. So if you haven't done any local promotion, I would really encourage you to do so. Part of the reason for that is because I've talked to a number of authors actually who are doing local, what, I don't know what you call it, I guess drop ships or pickups, or they'll drop off the book at your house, leave it on your doorstep, the no contact kind of thing. And it's a really kind of a cool thing to do locally, right? Especially, obviously December 17th, there's still a little bit of time for the holiday season, not a ton. A lot of people wait until the last minute. But it's kind of a cool idea, because I think that, you and I are in different parts of the country, and you guys have had issues there too with supply chains, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's amazing how spoiled we get when all of a sudden, and now it's gotten a lot better, but I will say for a while there, it was a little panic inducing when you go on Amazon or anywhere else. Honestly, it was happening to everybody. And where you go and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to order this. And you're used to having stuff within a couple days. And it definitely was not a couple days. And most websites, when I shop online, still have the kind of banner at the top warning people that shipping times are delayed and unpredictable. So everybody's trying to do their best, but the guarantees aren't there like they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that becoming, I guess really the term is becoming less Amazon dependent, even though I write a book about Amazon, so I sound like I'm a little bit, Penny sounds very two-faced. She sucks at selling books on Amazon. But I think that ramping up your website is going to be really important. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest pieces, as I was researching this show and some articles that I'm putting up to the blog for the end of the year stuff, is that author platform. So your newsletter, your fans, being able to get in touch with your readers was so crucially important this year. And authors who didn't have that kind of a reader, that kind of connection to their reader base, really lost out on a lot of promotion.
Oh, definitely. And they've been playing a lot of catch up too. We've been dealing with a lot of that. I've noticed in our assessments and things like that, the marketing assessments that we do, that's come up a lot more because it's such an important part of an author's platform now that I definitely, when I'm doing those, address it much more heavily than I did, a year ago, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So versus like, it would be really great if you did X, Y, and Z, has really changed to you need to add this to your site to make it easier for people to X, Y. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just that notion of it would be nice if you did it. This would be a bonus for your fans or for your potential readers. We have a lot of those things have turned into this really needs to be a part of what you're doing if you're going to remain competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also, um, you know, so this goes back to this dream book that I am not qualified to write, but that I think would be interesting to read and to see is how this fear that many people had about, in-person events and, going outside and even shopping and things like that, how that impacts us. Because I think that fear is hard to unlearn. And I think that even in 2021, you're going to see a lot of effort being put into from concerts and in-person events and things to really get people out of their houses. I think that's going to be something that's a little bit challenging for people. So, in-person events, I think we're going to start to see fewer of those. Get used to being on video. Get used to doing events, and we're going to talk about that in the New Year's Eve show. Just some great ways to promote in 2021. Really getting used to doing Zoom events, doing video events, whatever your platform is, right? That you're doing Facebook Live events, whatever. Even, consider live streaming events if, and partnering with bookstores. I think in 2021, we are going to see some wildly creative stuff that we didn't even dream up yet on this call. Just in terms of, supporting local bookstores, doing book events, but doing them, still doing them virtually to some extent.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I actually kind of love it as much as, the in-person stuff I don't think is ever going to go away completely. But I think this has made a lot of people realize that there's so much more room for so many more authors and artists and things like that because of the virtual space.
Mm-hmm.
Because whereas, event spaces and things like that, it's like, okay, the staff and everything could maybe handle doing one of those every other month because of the logistical, everything that goes on. But being able to put on a successful virtual event is very, very different. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this has created a lot of potential opportunities for authors who, again, are willing to step up and get their ducks in a row and make sure they know how to present themselves and have something really special to offer. Those authors that are ready to jump into those opportunities. This is amazing.
Yeah. And I also think that, speaking events, all of mine obviously moved online this year, except for one that I had in January, which was amazing. But I think that what I have learned from a lot of these conferences is that this has really opened their eyes to, oh my gosh, we don't have to pay to fly people out to speak at these events. So if you have wanted to launch your speaking career, 2021 may be a really good opportunity to do that, because this year has changed the dynamic of all of these events. And it's not necessarily just for publishing, it's everything. Business conferences, women's conferences, parenting conferences, all of that has really, really changed, where they've said, even if we do it in person, a quote unquote limited in-person event, we might want to bring the speakers in virtually. And it's always nicer to be in person. Like, if I had a choice between the two, I would always pick the in-person because I like that. But I think that you're going to see a lot more virtual stuff too.
Yep, exactly.
And I think that one of the other things that you mentioned too was the bonus content.
Oh, yes. This is another thing that I feel like people that, again, I keep saying it, but it really is true that it's amazing how, there's all these great ideas. We give all these great recommendations, tips. You should do this, that, and the third. And it sounds like a lot of work, but believe it or not, it's still a very small percentage of authors that are really taking advantage of things like creating bonus content and really digging into creating special branding elements and creating a world, for the universe that they've created with their characters and things like that. It sounds like a lot of work, and not like you can pull it all together in one afternoon by any means, but there are still so few authors that are really committing to doing this. the opportunity is there. So don't think that's like, oh, I'm behind the eight ball. I haven't even started that stuff yet. It's like, well, then start it, because there's still a lot of people, it's like 5 years ago, Penny, how few authors were using Author Central compared to now.
Yeah, that's very, very true. No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, we've been saying it for so long, like get on there, because so few authors for the longest time were not maximizing on that element of Amazon that really adds to your brand, into your professionalism and things like that. And now a lot of people are on board with it. So there is this kind of build up of these great new things that come out that people are, becoming a part of. So I think like building a world, building special bonus content for your readers to be a part of that keeps pulling them back into your funnel and into your brand and staying in touch with you. I think there's still a lot of opportunity there where there aren't a lot of authors that are really killing it in that sphere yet. The ones that do really stand out, and, anybody here listening could be that next author that's doing it really, really well.
Yeah, that's very, very true. It's still surprising to me how little of that you really actually see. One of the other things that you talked about, which I thought was really astute, is that this year has really changed people sharing their opinions online. I mean, have you seen a lot of that in terms of like people putting up more reviews and things?
Yes, I think that's another thing that we've seen an increase in. People are spending more time online. They're buying more online. Just so much more is happening online. And it's not something you can avoid anymore. And also, there's been so much that has been going on in the world that people feel very opinionated about, Yeah. So I just think in general, people are much more emboldened to just be out there online, share their opinions, share their thoughts. And so I think that's a good reminder for authors that there's very little room for error when it comes to, making sure that your editing is really tight before you put your book out there. And, having covers that don't meet the specific genre or topic or industry standard, there's very little room for error in that regard either. People are going to start calling you out, and it's hard to get not stellar reviews, but for the most part, you have a lot of control over a lot of what readers take, issue with, I will say.
Right.
And independent publishing has been around for a really long time. Penny, you've been doing this for 20 years. There's a lot of other great people that have been out there, like putting out fantastic resources and tips and recommendations and developing great books and things like that for authors to follow. So there's really no excuse to be like, well, I don't really understand that. It's like, it's out there.
Right.
So
right.
It's definitely out there. Again, there's no participation trophy in publishing. So if you're going to do this, if you're going to put a book out there, take advantage of all the knowledge. Understand that independent publishing is not this kind of like, oh, good for you. You get a clap or a pat on the back because you put out a book. It's like, no, people are putting out books all the time now.
Yeah.
So there really is no excuse for these kind of easy things that should just be, hit a home run on: the editing, the book covers, the book descriptions, things like that. I think it's always been important, but I really think you can't afford to not just get those right the first time.
Yeah.
Going into 2021. I think these are things that readers are just not going to accept less than on for much longer,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think that you really have to. I mean, and we kind of say this every year, but I think this year is even more true because, people we've spent so much more time online this year than I think we ever have, that our expectation, the bar has really been raised, and you have to bring your A game. And there's no reason in the world not to publish the best possible book that you can. So, well, we hope that this particular episode has been really helpful. It has been our pleasure. We are down to our final episode in 2 weeks for 2020. And we hope that you all have a really, really great holiday, whatever you celebrate. And this has been Amy Cornell and Penny Sansevieri with a Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. And I want to remind y'all, we love reviews. So please review this book on Spotify or Audible or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you.